Ma'am, he doesn't belong here. He's loitering in the lobby. I've already called the police. The white hotel manager's voice was sharp, certain, but she had no idea that the quiet black boy she just humiliated in front of a dozen guests was the son of the very woman who signs her paycheck. And when that woman walked through those glass doors 12 minutes later, the entire lobby froze. Before we dive into this powerful story of quiet strength, mistaken assumptions, and a twist no one saw coming, tap that like button if you believe in dignity over assumptions. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss stories that move your heart and shake your spirit. Where are you watching from? Drop your country or city in the comments. We love seeing how far our stories travel. Now, let's begin. The marble floors of the Grand Pelican Hotel shimmered under the morning sun. The lobby buzzed with soft classical music, crisp newspaper rustles, and the faint hum of a high-end espresso machine near the corner cafe. It was a quiet Tuesday, the kind of day where nothing should go wrong. But something did. A 12-year-old boy named Micah stood near the front desk, alone, small backpack on one shoulder, holding a thick blue envelope with a hotel logo printed boldly on the flap. He didn't look lost, but he wasn't moving either. He just stood there, brown skin, big curious eyes, neatly braided hair. His sneakers were too clean to be old, but his silence made him invisible, until she noticed him. "Excuse me?" said a clipped nasal voice behind the counter. "Young man, are you waiting for someone?" The voice belonged to Ms. Trina Calloway, the front desk manager. Mid-40s, blazer too tight around the shoulders, hair sprayed into a rigid ponytail. Her badge said Senior Guest Experience Manager. Micah nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am. I was told to wait here. My mom is coming." Trina tilted her head. "Are you a guest here?" Micah hesitated. "No, but then you can't loiter in the lobby, I'm afraid." She forced a professional smile, but her eyes darted to the security camera above the concierge desk. "This space is for paying guests only." Micah opened the envelope in his hand. "I was told to hand this to the general manager. My mom asked me to drop it off." Trina frowned. She didn't reach for the envelope. Instead, she stepped out from behind the counter, high heels clicking against the tile. "And who is your mother, young man?" Micah swallowed. "She's working upstairs." "Oh, really?" Trina's smile thinned. "What department?" She said not to say. "Just hand this over and wait here for her." That did it. Trina's expression hardened. "We've had issues with kids trying to sneak in and cause disturbances. You need to leave. Now." Micah blinked. "But she told me to." "I don't care what she told you. Either leave or I'll call security." Micah gripped the envelope tightly. His palms were sweating now. "I'm not doing anything wrong," he whispered. "I just..." Loud enough for two guests sipping cappuccinos nearby. "Security. To the front desk. Now." Micah's breath caught in his throat. He didn't cry. He didn't run. He stood still, quiet as a breath. People turned to look. One woman pulled out her phone. And somewhere between shame and confusion, Micah realized something deeper. They weren't seeing him. They were judging him. 2 minutes later, a tall security guard named Brett approached. His expression was more tired than hostile, but the sight of a black child being scolded in a luxury hotel lobby triggered something automatic. "Hey, kid," Brett said gently, "why don't we step outside?" Micah stared at the man. "I didn't do anything." "He says he didn't do anything." Trina scoffed. "That's what they all say." Then she leaned over and added under her breath, "Bet he came in to steal tips." Brett didn't respond, but he noticed Micah's hands trembling, still gripping the sealed envelope. "What's in that?" Micah handed it over silently. Brett examined the label. "Tour. Hotel GM. From CEO Private Residence." His brows furrowed. "Where did you get this?" "My mom gave it to me. She told me to wait here." "Who's your mom?" "She said she's in a meeting upstairs, but she didn't want to disturb anyone." Brett stared at him for a long beat. Then his walkie crackled. "Control, we have a situation at the lobby. Can you confirm if Miss Amani is back in the building?" The voice on the other end responded after a pause. "Yes, she checked in through the executive suite entrance 10 minutes ago." "Why?" Brett looked at Trina. "Trina," he said slowly, "what's the name on the CEO residence file again?" Trina blinked. "What are you talking about?" Brett unfolded the return label on the envelope. Written in fine cursive, "From Amani L. Rivers." Trina's jaw twitched. "No, that's not possible. She's the CEO," Brett muttered. "That's her son." Micah, still quiet, just nodded. 12 minutes later, the double glass doors slid open. In walked a tall, poised black woman in a tailored ivory pantsuit, gold watch on her wrist, and not a hair out of place. Her presence hit the room like thunder in slow motion. Amani Rivers, CEO of Grand Pelican Hospitality Group, owner of the hotel franchise, known for her grace, her sharp wit, and her refusal to play to anyone's expectations. Her heels clicked steadily toward the lobby. She saw Micah standing frozen beside security. Her eyes moved slowly to Trina. And then, she smiled. But it wasn't a kind smile. It was the kind of smile a lioness wears when she finds a predator cornering her cub. Trina stood straighter, tried to look composed. "Ma'am, I didn't realize. You called security on my son? I didn't know he was he said he wasn't a guest. He was just standing there, exactly where I told him to wait," Amani said calmly. "But ma'am, there have been issues in the past, young people loitering. You didn't ask who he was. You didn't check his name. You didn't read the envelope. You just saw a black child and assumed he didn't belong." A few guests had stopped to watch. Phones were out now. One man had already started filming. Amani turned to Micah. "Are you okay, baby?" Micah nodded, but he looked down. She put her arm around him gently, then faced Trina again. "I've run this company for 9 years. I've hired hundreds of people. I've created jobs in 5 countries. But today, I watched my son almost get escorted out of a building I own because someone decided he wasn't worth 5 seconds of questions." "I'm sorry," Trina mumbled. "I truly didn't mean." Amani raised a hand. "You meant exactly what you did. You just didn't mean to be caught." Amani leaned into his mother's side, and Amani bent low, brushing a tear from his cheek. "Let's go home," she whispered. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to fire anyone. Not yet. Her silence spoke more than 1,000 disciplinary memos, and as they turned to leave the lobby, the only sound louder than their footsteps was the hush that fell over every guest who saw what happened. The automatic doors at Grand Pelican slowly hissed shut behind Amani and her son, but inside the lobby, the silence still hung like stale perfume. Trina stood frozen at the front desk, sweat prickling under her blazer, watching her career unravel in slow motion. A guest coughed. Another lowered her phone, pretending not to record. Then Brett, the security officer, walked back toward her, eyes heavy with disappointment. "You messed up, Trina," he said plainly. She spun around. "Don't act like you wouldn't have done the same. He didn't belong here. He said it himself." Brett leaned in, lowering his voice. "You didn't even listen. You didn't ask. You just saw a black kid and assumed the worst. That envelope had her name on it." Trina's voice cracked. "How was I supposed to know? He wasn't in uniform, didn't have a badge. He's 12. That shut her up." That stairs in the executive suite, Amani was pacing. She wasn't the kind of woman who exploded. Her power was quiet, controlled. But today, something burned hotter than usual. Not because of Trina's insult, she'd faced worse, but because Micah had looked humiliated. Her son, who'd always stood tall and asked too many questions, had dropped his head like he was wrong for breathing. She turned to her assistant, Gia, a sharp young woman in a navy blouse, who had just walked in with updates. "I want HR to meet me in the Oak boardroom," Amani said. Gia hesitated. "Right now? Yes. And bring me Trina Calloway's personnel file. Full record. Should I alert the press team?" Amani paused. "Not yet. No cameras. No statements. Not until I decide what justice looks like." Meanwhile, Trina sat alone in the staff break room, nursing cold coffee. Her phone buzzed. Twice. First a message from her daughter. "Mom, why are you trending?" Then a second message with a link to a TikTok video. Trina clicked it, and there she was, captured from the side, yelling at a child. Her finger pointed. The words "I already called the police" looped over soft piano music and zoom-ins of Micah's nervous face. The caption read, "All this for a kid delivering an envelope to his CEO mom." Already 78,000 views. Trina's hand trembled. She set the phone down. Her career wasn't just at risk, it was on fire. 3 floors up, the Oak boardroom filled quietly. Amani sat at the head of the table. On her left, HR Director Naomi, an older woman with a hard stare and folders tucked under her arm. On her right, Gia, typing notes. In front of her, Trina. The woman's blazer looked looser now, her mascara slightly smudged. She didn't look proud anymore. She looked like someone waiting for a verdict. "I want you to walk me through what happened," Amani said evenly. Trina cleared her throat. Ma'am, I misunderstood the situation. I truly thought the boy was lost, or casing the lobby. I didn't mean to offend anyone, Amani replied, her voice still. You profiled a 12-year-old. You embarrassed him in front of strangers, and you did it without asking a single identifying question. That's not a misunderstanding. That's bias. Trina tried to speak, but Amani raised a finger. Not rudely, just firmly. I've heard enough. Now I want to hear from HR. Naomi opened her folder. Ms. Calloway has received 3 prior complaints regarding her conduct. 2 verbal warnings, one written last year for a similar incident involving a non-English-speaking guest she mistook for a loiterer. Trina blurted out. That was different. Amani looked at her. You're right. This time it was my child. Trina flinched. Naomi closed the file. Per company policy, this qualifies as grounds for suspension, pending review. Amani leaned back. But then she did something unexpected. She turned to Gia and said, How's Micah? Gia blinked. He's in the car with Jonah, your driver. Quiet. Just listening to music. Amani nodded slowly, then stared at the polished surface of the table for a long, thoughtful second. I want Trina reassigned. Trina looked up. You're not firing me? Naomi looked surprised, too. Amani turned her eyes on Trina. No, not yet. But you're off this floor. Effective immediately. You'll be transferred to our Regional Staff Development Center in Hartford. That's 2 hours away. Amani didn't blink. That's right. Trina leaned forward. Please, I have a daughter. I can't afford. You should have thought about that before you used my son as a target for your assumptions. Then, more softly. But I want you to learn. That's why I'm not ending your career. I'm asking you to confront your choices, somewhere no one knows your name. 2 weeks passed. The hotel buzzed again with quiet elegance. Micah hadn't returned to the building. Amani worked from home more. She never mentioned the incident publicly. But the staff changed. Brett, the security officer, was promoted to lobby coordinator. All team members, new and old, were enrolled in a mandatory bias awareness program. Trina, meanwhile, reported to her new post in Hartford. She didn't tell her coworkers why she had been transferred, but she felt the difference. No one greeted her with the warmth she was used to. Every time she opened her mouth, she wondered if they saw her like that viral video had shown. Late one evening, she walked past a conference room. A group of trainees were watching a silent video on the projector. She froze. It was the same TikTok clip, the same boy, the same mistake, only now it had a voiceover. Racism isn't always loud. Sometimes it sounds like policy. Sometimes it looks like indifference. One of the trainees asked, Who was that woman? Nobody answered. But Trina knew. She clutched her clipboard and walked away. Back in the city, Micah sat on the edge of his bed, sketching in a small notepad. He hadn't spoken about what happened, but his drawings told the story. People towering over a small figure, security cameras, hotel lobbies. Amani watched from the doorway. You want to talk about it? Micah didn't look up. I was just standing there. I know. He flipped the page. Do you think she felt bad? Amani walked in and sat beside him. Maybe, but what matters is that you didn't deserve it. You were respectful. You stood your ground, and you didn't lash out. Micah stared at the page. She didn't even ask my name. Amani nodded. That's the world sometimes, but it's also why we build our own. Narrate to what the build fits. Amani had personally drafted it. We are not a company that tolerates unconscious bias. We are a family that trains to be conscious, kind, and human, because our guests, our staff, and our children deserve better than apologies after the damage is done. It was printed, laminated, placed in the break rooms of over 80 hotels. Amani never mentioned Trina by name, but the message was clear. Micah wasn't drawing as much these days. His sketchpad sat untouched on the nightstand, half covered by a math book and a half-eaten protein bar. He didn't talk about the hotel day anymore, but Amani knew the silence wasn't peace. It was stillness with a shadow behind it. Some wounds don't bleed. They bruise, quietly. So she watched. She listened, and she waited, until one morning she saw something that made her freeze. Micah had opened his school-issued tablet. On the screen was a YouTube video. Title, Black Kid Profiled in Luxury Hotel, You Won't Believe Who His Mom Is. Over 1.6 million views. Amani stepped in. Micah, pause that. He turned to her, eyes wide. I didn't search for it. Someone sent it in class. They were laughing, and then they weren't. She sat beside him, watched a few seconds of the video. It had no footage of her, but plenty of Micah captured mid-shame. Her son was a meme now, a hashtag, a symbol, and for the first time in her career, Amani Rivers felt helpless. Raced through Praxel Jopovishin, from Othlas weather, Lanyov kicks tea. Later that afternoon, in her office, she picked up her phone and stared at the contact saved as Elijah Thomas, attorney, personal, not corporate. She tapped call. He picked up on the second ring. Still the most powerful woman I know, Elijah said, his voice smooth like velvet. To what do I owe the honor? Elijah, she sighed. I need advice. Oh no, you're using your lawyer voice. This must be serious. Amani leaned back in her chair, pinching the bridge of her nose. They turned Micah into content. Elijah was quiet for a beat. Then, TikTok, YouTube, Reels, clips, over 1 million views. I never gave consent for his face to be shared. Elijah exhaled. We can file takedowns. Claim violation of minor privacy laws. Might take a while, but it's doable. Amani didn't answer immediately, because there was something else brewing in her heart. Not legal, not public-facing, a question she hadn't asked herself until now. What if the real danger wasn't Trina? What if it was the world outside, watching a quiet black boy humiliated, and thinking that was just another Tuesday? Juan Hartford. Trina was unraveling, not publicly, not dramatically, but privately, in the little ways people do when regret sticks to their bones like wet fabric. She sat alone in her studio apartment, smaller than her old place, with peeling paint and no view. Her daughter Paige was staying with her ex-husband until school term ended. Trina hadn't told her why they'd moved. She still hadn't told anyone. The only thing that kept her company now was a slowly growing inbox of hate mail, anonymous messages, angry emails forwarded by HR. One of them read, "How does it feel to be the face of quiet racism?" She stared at that line for a long time. The word quiet bothered her the most, because deep down she never saw herself as a bad person, just someone doing her job, following rules, keeping the lobby safe. But then she'd watch that video again, and there it was, her own voice, sharp, dismissive, accusatory, her own finger, pointed like a weapon at a child who said nothing but the truth. She hated the sound of herself. 3 months passed. The video slowed in views. A new scandal trended. A footballer cheated. A celebrity divorced. The internet moved on, but Amani didn't. Not because of revenge, but because Micah stopped sleeping through the night. She'd hear his feet on the hallway floor at 3 a.m., the bathroom light flicking on, the soft sound of him talking to himself in the mirror, repeating the words, "I belong, I belong, I belong," the same phrase he'd whispered when Trina confronted him. And suddenly, Amani realized something. She could write policies. She could move people. She could shift culture in boardrooms, but she couldn't unhumiliate her son. Ron Rabel, why well, sage sempre cool to you, but tonight she'll thin the night you. That weekend she took Micah to an art gallery. No phones, no cameras, just oil paintings, sculptures, and silence. He walked slowly past a sculpture of a child wrapped in bronze chains, head down, hands open. Micah asked, "Is he trapped?" Amani said, "Maybe. Or maybe he's learning how to carry the weight." Micah tilted his head. "I think he's waiting for someone to help him break it." She knelt beside him. "I'm sorry you had to carry that day alone," she said gently. "You shouldn't have." Micah didn't cry, but for the first time, he held her hand longer than usual. Ron Rabel, Ron Rate. At the same time, 150 miles away, Trina walked into a local volunteer center. She had signed up for a community workshop on youth mentorship, hoping to blend in. She didn't. A man named Marvin, who led the program, recognized her. He pulled her aside. "Trina Calloway, right? From the hotel story?" She stiffened. "If this is going to be awkward." "No. I'm glad you're here," Marvin said, "but I want to ask you something." "Okay. Why now? Why this?" Trina looked down at her hands. "Because I never want to be that woman again. And I don't know how to fix what I did, but I want to do better somewhere." Marvin looked her in the eye. "Then start by listening more than you speak." 2 months later, something unexpected arrived at Amani's desk. A handwritten letter. Thick envelope. No logo. Inside, a note on plain paper. "Ms. Rivers, this isn't a request for forgiveness. This is a confession. I judged your son. I didn't see a child. I saw a threat. Because I was trained that way, and because I never stopped to unlearn it. I don't expect redemption, but I'm trying to earn repair. Thank you for not ending my career. and I'm sorry I almost damaged his future before it began. Trina. Amani stared at the letter for a long time, not angry, not pleased, just still. Because sometimes remorse is loud, and sometimes it's this quiet. That night, she handed the letter to Micah. He read it silently, then folded it carefully and placed it inside his sketchbook. "Are you okay?" she asked. Micah looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, he smiled. "I think she finally asked my name." 6 months after the incident, life had returned to its gentle rhythm. On the surface, the hotel operated smoothly. New staff were hired. Guests returned with good reviews. Micah went back to school. Amani, as always, led her empire with quiet fire. But healing is rarely loud. It's a slow return, a flicker of trust, a single sketch on an empty page. Micah had started drawing again. Only this time, he drew himself. One day, Gia rushed into Amani's office, iPad in hand. "You need to see this." Amani looked up. "Another video?" Gia shook her head. "No, a proposal, from Hartford." She handed over the tablet. The screen showed a slideshow titled, "Breaking the Cycle, a diversity education program for frontline hotel staff." Below it, a name, by Trina Calloway. Amani raised her brow. "She's still with the company?" Gia nodded. "Barely. She asked to stay on probation, unpaid. She's been volunteering in inner-city mentorship centers, teaching her own program to staff recruits. No camera, no ego." Amani leaned back. Gia continued. "She submitted this to our internal training board. They said it's the most emotionally effective module they've seen." Amani paused, then swiped through the presentation. It was raw, honest, centered not on policy but on what it feels like to be misjudged, and to be the one who misjudges. One slide hit harder than the rest. Slide title, "The Day I Pointed at a Child Instead of Asking His Name." Bias is not always hate. Sometimes it's fear disguised as protocol, and healing begins the moment we ask, "Who did I become when I stopped seeing people as people?" Amani closed the tablet and handed it back. "Let her present, but not to staff." Gia blinked. "Then to whom?" Amani smiled. "To our shareholders." 3 weeks later, Trina stood at a sleek podium in the company's glass-walled conference center. Behind her, a crowd of high-level investors, regional directors, and brand ambassadors waited. She had no script, just trembling hands. But when she looked out into the crowd, she saw her daughter, Paige, sitting beside a woman she'd never expected to see again. Amani. And beside her, Micah, sitting tall, a pen in his hand, a sketchpad open on his lap. Trina swallowed hard, then spoke. "When I first got transferred to Hartford, I told myself I'd been unfairly punished, that I didn't deserve what happened, that I was just doing my job." She exhaled. "But the truth is, I failed someone, a child, and not just any child. I failed the child of the woman who built the very company I worked for." The room was silent. "I didn't lose my job, but I lost something else, my pride. My daughter saw the video, my community did, and for the first time, I had to answer a question I'd spent years ignoring. What have I been trained to fear?" Her voice cracked. "And what kind of world does my silence help create for the next black child who walks into a place he should feel safe?" She looked at Micah. "I can't erase what I did, but I can spend the rest of my career helping others see what I refuse to." Then, gently, "His name is Micah, and his mother's name is Amani." The room burst into a standing ovation, not because of pity, but because something had changed. A bridge had been built. Afterward, Micah approached Trina quietly. He didn't smile, but he held out a small envelope. Inside was a sketch, hand-drawn. It showed Trina at a podium, speaking. Behind her, a blurred shadow of her past self pointing. The two versions of her divided by a soft line of light. At the bottom, he'd written, "People aren't always what they were. Sometimes they're becoming who they need to be." Trina teared up. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't deserve this." Micah shrugged. "Maybe not, but you earned the right to try again." That night, Amani tucked him in. He didn't say much, just yawned and curled under the blanket. She kissed his forehead and turned to leave when he suddenly asked, "Mom?" "Yes? Do you think, if I wasn't your son, would it have ended differently?" She paused at the door. "I think the world would have been quieter about it. That's the part I hate the most." Micah nodded slowly, then whispered, "I'm glad you're loud. Sometimes, strength isn't found in speeches. It's found in the moment you pause and say, 'I was wrong.'" Sometimes, justice doesn't scream. It whispers, "You can do better." Micah didn't just survive that lobby moment. He walked through it and helped others see through their blindfolds. And Trina, she didn't get cancelled. She got confronted. And from that, she chose growth. Because the truth is, we all carry doors inside us. Some are locked by fear, some by ignorance. But every so often someone knocks, not to punish us, but to ask if we're ready to let humanity in. So, what would you do if someone judged your child before asking their name? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story that might just change how you see the world. And tell us, where are you watching from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. We'll see you in the next one.